8 to 10 minutes, please, James?
You got it.
Let me please introduce to you our guest, Chris Walinski.
Yes.
I hope I didn't butcher that. That's all right.
Come on up.
Chris, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay. You're driving alongside the road, you see some cop cars. You don't think much of it, but as you pass by, you see someone that looks like your best friend. Curious about it, you text your best friend afterwards, and your best friend embarrassingly tests up to possession of 2 ounces of marijuana. You knew your friend had an ailment, you knew she was sick, but you didn't know she was using medicinal marijuana to ease the pain. But because she had these 2 ounces of marijuana, she's going to be arrested. Although legal in some states, I'm here to persuade you that the possession and use of marijuana should be legalized nationwide. I've done a lot of research on the topic, and I know that many of my friends use the substance, as I'm sure many people you know as well. Legalization of marijuana will only benefit the U.S. People will use the substance whether or not it's legal. So why not help bolster the U.S. economy while doing so? I will talk about why keeping marijuana legal is not working for the U.S., why marijuana has such a negative stigma that hinders its legalization, and the steps that can be taken toward its legalization. The problem is that marijuana as an illegal substance doesn't help the U.S. in any way. Patients who use medical marijuana for alleviation of pain because of other OTC drugs make them sick are actually getting arrested for it in New Jersey, according to a drug article on the Alternate website published in December of 2013. The illegal status of marijuana also drives away potential profit for the U.S. To show you this, I'm going to talk about Amsterdam. Marijuana is legal in the city of Amsterdam, and it's known in its coffee shops, and they sell it in various pastry forms. An online journal about Dutch coffee shops written by Berkeley professor Robert McCoon, published in November of 2011, reports that 4 to 5 million tourists who visit Amsterdam visit a coffee shop. And of these tourists, 10% come specifically to visit a coffee shop. If the U.S. had a system more like this, they would create more profit and job opportunities. Yet the Amsterdam coffee shops have strict policies that prevent marijuana use, excuse me. They cannot sell more than 5 grams to a single person per day, according to the McCoon online article. Not only is the U.S. not profiting from this, $3.6 billion is spent annually by taxpayers enforcing anti-marijuana laws, according to an October 2014 article called The Impending Legalization of Marijuana by Jane Forkin. A shocking statistic from Forkin's article states that after California decriminalized marijuana, drug overdose fell by 20%. If we apply this to the national scale, we're saying that more people are allowed to be killed now than if marijuana was legalized, or at least decriminalized in some aspect. So the U.S. is losing money, people who need marijuana medically are getting arrested, and people are dying at a higher rate while it remains illegal. Now that you understand the problem, let's explore the costs. Many people have a negative attitude towards this legalization that creates a stigma. Many of you might have been thinking, oh, he supports legalization of weed, he might be a pothead. This is the stigma that I want to try to remove. According to a 2014 article about the stigma of medicinal marijuana by Jeffrey Rudsky, job applicants who use medicinal marijuana are viewed as less qualified than a bike-using job applicant. You might think that marijuana is an abhorrent substance and should stay legal. You might think you're better off with your alcohol. I would say that the reason you feel a certain way about one and a different way about the other is not the health aspect, but more the psychology of it. Rudsky's journal article attributes many Americans' negative feelings of marijuana towards the hippie and counterculture movements that happened decades ago, thus creating a stigma. Former Massachusetts Representative Barney Frank, quote, says, quote, "Alcohol does more damage in many areas of society than drugs, but we treat marijuana as much worse because it's associated with the counterculture." So what are people really worried about in regards to marijuana? The active ingredient, THC? Rudsky mentioned that THC is legally prescribed in pill form for anorexic AIDS patients and for those who undergo chemotherapy. So now that you know the cause of why it's not being legalized, let's explore the solution. The legalization of pot has worked in other states as well as foreign countries, so there should be no reason why we don't. I have an image here You can see California is the highest producing state of marijuana, according to this image I've gotten from the CQ Researcher website, published in June of 2009. It's almost triple that of the second highest producing state. And in the next image, you have here all the states that use marijuana, and US is actually, this is from a few years ago, but US is actually US uses the top amount of marijuana. 40% of the population smokes marijuana, or at least tried it once. And this is outdated, so it might be a little bit higher. Many of you probably know that Colorado is one of the states that has legalized marijuana. I have in this image, all of the states in green have legalized it, as well as Washington, D.C., and the states in teal have decriminalized it. I've obtained this image from a U.S. news website about pot legalization published in November 2014. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, in an online article about marijuana legalization published August 2013, says, "The federal government is respecting the will of Colorado voters." Now, I'd just like the time to tell you the difference between legalize and decriminalize. According to an article on the Daily Caller website published October 2013, legalizing something will remove criminal penalties and is a source of taxation. Decriminalizing something removes criminal and monetary penalties involving any sort of possession. If marijuana was legalized, there'd probably be no marijuana drug war, nobody having to sneak and smuggle across the border, no black market, and more jobs that could be created that would allow a legal transport method across the border. This whole debacle over marijuana is like the next prohibition. It's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, and people are doing it whether or not it's legal. I've illustrated to you the problem of how marijuana is an illegal substance doesn't help the US in any way. We've discussed the causal relationship that is less about the health effects and more about the psychological stigma that's been put upon it from the counterculture revolution. Finally, we learned that it's legal in other states, and the US heavily uses it anyways, so there should be no reason why it's not legalized. I hope I persuaded you that legalizing would be beneficial. I've done extensive research, as I mentioned, and I know people who use it, as I'm sure you might as well. Legalization of marijuana will be good for the economy, it will save lives, and prevent people who use it medically from getting arrested. Somewhere in the United States, a lady sits in her rocking chair, knitting a scarf. She has her TV on in the background, but she can't see it very well. She's baking an apple streusel from her oven, and the smell wafts throughout her house. Even the neighbors can smell it. It smells delicious. It sounds like the picture-perfect life of growing old in America. But this image is shattered as you hear police sirens getting louder and louder and louder. Next thing she knows, they walk up her rickety steps and into her house. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for the possession and use of marijuana," they say. She says, "Oh dear, I use it because I have," but she's cut off mid-sentence. She was minding her own business and only used medical marijuana for the ease of her glaucoma, an eye condition. She wasn't hurting anyone, but the cops didn't see it like that. They saw a person in possession and usage of an illegal drug. She was taken away. Does this sound just? Did this woman deserve this treatment? A quote from Carl Sagan, respected astrophysicist, sums legalization of marijuana up nicely. "The illegality of cannabis is outrageous, an impediment to full utilization of a drug which helps produce the serenity and insight, sensitivity and fellowship so desperately needed in this increasingly mad and dangerous world." For those who are worried about whether marijuana will be abused or fall into the wrong hands, here's a big news flash. Those who want marijuana already have the means to access it, legal or not. Stop fighting this change. Stop fighting the inevitable. Stop fighting and start respecting. Perhaps our focal points are misguided. As Bob Marley put so eloquently, quote, "Herb is the healing of a nation, alcohol is destruction."